Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be going through what I call the Victron universe. It's all the components from Victron Energy that I'm using to manage, produce, and shape the power systems, and as well as the VRM, which is how I use the core of the system to figure out what's actually happening with my power. So hopefully you find this video interesting. Hey everybody, so I've decided just to put together a overview of the Victron universe is what I call it. The reason for that is that I've done a few things, trial and error, tried different equipment, and I kind of ended up here, and I'm glad I did, because there's quite a few things in that are useful, not endorsed or any way by Victron or anything like that. It's just personal experiences, and I just wanted to share kind of like what I've learned. So I guess what started all this way in the beginning was my need to charge my batteries. So before I demolished this boat, and rebuilt it all, I had a starter battery and a house battery, and I was just blown away at how fast things were going. So I decided to put a solar charger in, and I had this little Chinese device that I couldn't understand. It was cheap. I bought it because it was 20 bucks, and I just wanted to monitor my batteries with it. But I couldn't tell if it was charging or not charging. I couldn't understand it that well. So I'm like, okay, went with Raymarine, and I put the Raymarine Shunt in, which was like a step up. At least I could kind of understand what was happening, but they had some really randomized programming in it. And when I switched over to the electric motor, there was a fair amount of data that I wanted that I couldn't get, but I did get it on the Raymarine display parts of it. So for example, my draw and the approximate length of time to charge back up, that kind of thing was on there. So overall that was okay, but they had some weird programming. I remember the screen flashing when it's charging, or within different rates, that kind of thing. So plus I couldn't turn off the screen at night. I don't know, there's maybe things I couldn't figure out, but it just was not kind of comprehensive. And then what I found was that, okay, there was kind of like no real there was no real connection between different components, and I had no history. Fine in the moment, but I really wanted to kind of go back and look at it and enter the Victron universe. So that was when I switched over to the BMV. So here on my device here, that's this unit here, and the smart shunt that goes with it provides basically reading of all the data coming out of the batteries. So I have a 48 volt system. You can see here on the screen, they give you kind of a quick view. There's 53.92 volts, 5.58 amps. There's 78% of the battery. So right now that's positive, meaning I'm putting in more than I'm using. So I've been doing some cooking. It rained. I left the Starlink on all night, that kind of thing. So I consumed the battery. Usually it's around 85, but it's a little bit more this morning. And then now that there's a little bit of sun, I'm probably not getting that much, but that would be down here on the shunt. On the smart solar, you can see it's 423 watts right now. That is half of what my capabilities are. So anyways, make a long story short, once I went with the BMV and it had Bluetooth, there were some benefits to it. First off, from my phone, I could actually connect to it and see it. And just within the device itself, it kept a running history of over 30 days. So the very first thing I did was get the smart BMV. So I'll go through that first. The first thing I'm going to start with here is the battery monitor. So this is the first device that I had gotten. What I like about it is it just gives you the goods about your battery. Where are things sitting? You can program it with the size of your battery. So I'll show you that here. So when you do your initial setup, you kind of give it the size. Because they're lithium and they're specific, I was able to put in like exactly what my like the Pukert exponent, current threshold, like everything that I was able to find in the details from my lithium batteries, I was able to program here. And then it basically comes up with an accurate state of charge. And that is showing up here underneath my main number. So as I'm using the batteries, I kind of have an idea of where things are, specifically while motoring or in the morning. So for example, this morning, I was quite low. It's been raining, or it was kind of overcast today, and I left the Starlink on, and I had a few things running, the fridge and whatnot. So the history actually gives you kind of like what was the state of it at a particular time. But I don't use the screen too often. I use the trending screen fairly often to basically give me an idea of where did I consume my power and where did I lose different things. And then this actually can give you a kind of a breakdown. You can take a look at where things were, and this is all stored right inside of the battery monitor. So this is very useful information. You can see the time here. So this is multiple days. So there's a fair amount of information in here. So the first advantage I had was by putting this in was being able to see history. So I was able to kind of determine things that are happening over time. So that's very useful. So you can see this is actually where I boiled some water when I got here this morning, made a tea, then I ate breakfast, and then I made another tea, and then I had some various charging going on, and then over here I made lunch. So you can kind of start to look right into, what state was something in, how long did it take. So there's a lot of interpretive data that you can kind of look at here. I don't use it as much now that I've got the uplink working on the internet, and I'll show you guys why. But basically, in the Victron universe, the data now gets pushed up to the VRM, which is, I think, Victron Remote Monitoring, and you're able to get all of that data there. So it's useful. But on a moment in time, what I like the most about this is the Bluetooth. So if I need it, I can actually pull up the data right on my phone. Right now I'm connecting via Bluetooth, so you can open up some additional stats on each one of these things, and you can see, okay, there's 53.97 volts. I've got 10 amps coming in right now. My battery's 94%, and my state of charge is unlimited because I'm actually putting in more than I'm using. And then on the solar charger, it's the same sort of thing on the quick view. You get the quick stats. I've got 735 watts of power coming in. So going back into the battery monitor, this is probably the key things that I take a look at. I take a look at the current. How much power am I putting in right now to the batteries? What is my time remaining? That's probably the biggest thing that I take a look at. And once I've set this up, there's a Bluetooth feature in here called VE Smart Networking. And what this basically does is there's some key data points, and it passes it on to other things that are configured to use the same VE Smart Network. So in my case, battery voltage and battery current is being transmitted onto the internal Bluetooth network. And that's actually one thing that in Victron's world, they call it the smart shunt. So there's like a blue something, and then there's smart something in their naming or their vernacular. And the smart part means that it can communicate, and you want that. Because I actually bought the MPPT controller without it in the beginning. So it was like a blue solar MPPT controller, not the smart solar. And it worked fine, but it just didn't receive or send data over Bluetooth, which means that you would have to use a cable. Well, there's only one jack on it, so if you needed to do any programming or something, well, it couldn't communicate over Bluetooth in real time, that sort of thing. So that's an important piece. So for that, that's what this smart networking is for, to share information to make smarter decisions by the different tools, depending upon what's going on, because it's relying on outside information. And so for that, I think the next thing I'm going to take a look at is the battery sense here. All right, so the next thing I'm going to go into here is the battery sense. So this is a small little box, kind of looks like that on the screen here. And all it does is it's measuring the temperature and the battery voltage, but it has Bluetooth built into it, and it is actually sending the temperature data. You can see the voltage and temperature data onto the Victron network. And literally that's all it does. It also has a little trend thing where you can take a look at things, but it doesn't really do much. It's like configure it, set up your networking. It's saying, oh, I see these things here on the network, and it's showing you that it's communicating with it, but that's about it. It basically has a limited amount of information, but for me, this is really critical because the temperature here, you can see 27 degrees, is being transmitted over the VE Smart Network to the Cerbo. And sorry, not to the Cerbo, but to the, yes, no, to the Cerbo? No, to the smart, charging module. So the smart MPPT controller. It's being sent everywhere, but the one I'm concerned with is the smart MPPT controller. And the reason being is that because I've got lithium, you don't want to charge these things when the temperature is below zero. In fact, I have mine set to either 5 or 8 degrees. I'm like paranoid about it. So as soon as it starts getting cold, I don't want the batteries to charge anymore. So it would mean we need to run a heater or put something into the boat or just wait until the ambient temperature is higher and then charge the batteries. Otherwise, you damage them. So for me, that's really critical. And so 27 degrees is being sent on the network, and then other devices then can make sense of that. So next, I'm actually going to talk about the smart solar. Well, if this doesn't work after rebooting it, you know, I checked it from my phone, and it seems to work fine on the phone, but my Mac's getting a bit old, so maybe the Bluetooth update here is kind of not working right on my Mac. Okay, I'm back in it. I'm gonna try, oh, there it goes. So I'm gonna go back out. If I go to the VRM and Northern Comfort Online, I think I can get through it through this, which will then be Wi-Fi. Let's see if I can get it through this way. So it's not as accurate. There's a little bit of delay. You can see this is the little cloud icon. So we're missing a few things here in terms of programming, but the layout's about the same and sort of the key information anyways. Sorry about this big delay here, but I'm clearly having some issues. It looks like I can configure it. There's a few less functions, but it has all basically the same functionality, which is how much solar is coming in. Right now, 0 watts, so I forgot to trip the breaker for the power. Whenever you need to recycle the MPPT controller, you don't want to do it with load on the solar. You want to make sure that you cut the solar load, wait till this shows 0, and then cut the battery load, and then you turn the battery on first, so that way the unit can power up and have the capacitors full, and then you turn on the PV side, which is the solar panel side. So I'm just going to flip that on here. So see what happens. Might take a minute or two here to kick in. Oh, there it goes. So now it's letting in the power from the panels. So this device here, I used to use really regularly in the beginning when I was trying to determine like power. I didn't know how it was working, so I found this extremely invaluable. But the key things I think were just current, and then you want to program it to match your batteries. The history's nice. You can see when it's raining and when it's not. It's got in the Bluetooth version of it right now. If you remember, I'm in the VRM portion of it. It actually has a little icon up here that says it's receiving the temperature voltage. And why that's key, so there's 27 degrees here. When you go into the battery down at the bottom, the low temperature cutoff is 5 degrees. There's no temperature in the unit itself, so it has to read it from the batteries. So that value is actually coming from the battery sense module over the Bluetooth. And it is basically passing that data to the smart controller. And then here in the smart controller underneath the battery settings, I have it set to saying, well, if the battery temperature is less than 5, then stop charging. And that's basically just to protect the lithium batteries. So it's, again, you can kind of set this thing up to match your lithium battery setups, like what are your charging points and how long do you stay in absorption voltage, what voltage should it be, etc. There's a couple of settings here for do you want to be conservative or do you want to make it always on? Do you want to run underneath the battery life? I have it underneath battery life, which is probably like a slower charge than necessary, but if I left it to auto always on, it might be better in some circumstances. Up here in Canada, the sun is always at a bit of an angle on the panels, and my panels aren't facing the sun very often. So it's only from about 11 until 3 or 4. That's when I'm getting peak charge. Before that, I still get like 100 watts, 200 watts. So by even 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes everything's fully charged anyways. It's only if I'm cruising, staying on the boat, that I use more energy this way. But anyways, this at least gives you the ability to configure it. And then there's a little bit of a history here. If you want to take a look at a particular day, it can tell you, well, how much float, how much absorption, and how much bulk charging was it doing. And you can basically pick that by day, and you can kind of go back in time over the last, I think, 30 days. And then there's a detailed view, say 9 days ago, clearly there was a storm for 2 days. And then you can see I had a lot of charging going on, and then I caught back up after a couple of days, and now it's been sort of the regular cloudy, sunny, so middle. But generally speaking, by the, like I said, most days I'm back to 100 on most days. So this is the solar controller charging, and it's got some tweaks. Like I said, you can configure this to, for your batteries, put your charge limits on, don't charge it at a certain temperature, that kind of thing. But again, the history goes back 30 days, but it doesn't give you the exact detail that the VRM does, and that's what I'm going to look at here next. I picked up last year the Cerbo GX and the Touch GX, and there's not a lot to configure in here, but this isn't really what I bought it for. This thing is like the brains of the operation. So this is the way that I interpret it, but it also has additional inputs. So when I get my my motor sensor temperature, I actually feed it into the Cerbo. But you can put your tank inputs, a bunch of analog inputs. You can put NEMA 2000 inputs, a variety of things. It's what kind of makes sense. So in the Bluetooth side, it's what makes sense of things. So on the Bluetooth side of things, you just configure the network and it sees a bunch of Bluetooth stuff out here. That's it. Really the beauty on this is the VRM portal. And this is the portal here popping up. So as you can see, it's getting the data in real time up here at the top. The local time is 3:12. There's no AC input power. There's no generator power. However, I'm configured that way. Those two sources connect into the Victron Quattro, which I didn't show you yet. Actually, it's funny, the Quattro I probably should have done before this piece here, but so maybe I'll do the Quattro next, but it needs a special cable and things to get into it. But anyways, the AC loads right now is, you can kind of see down here, there's a little peak when I was cooking. But essentially, the AC loads is reading the AC power outlet. So my computer is charging. I got the Starlink on, and then I cooked a couple of times running my induction cooktop, so it's pretty limited. However, the Starlink, as you can see here, we've got 140 watts between my computer and the Starlink. That's really the only thing on there. Just looking behind me. So if I unplug my computer charging, so we'll see that drop down to 60 watts. So that's probably about accurate. I'd say that the Starlink is using somewhere around 50 to 70 watt range. There's about 28 watts that's being consumed by just the electronics of the Quattro. So as soon as you turn the Quattro on, it sucks 20 watts out, 28 watts. So the Starlink is using about 40. And yeah, that's all there is on the AC side. So as soon as I plug in my laptop here, you can actually see the laptop does charge quite a bit. It takes quite a bit of power. Over on the left here, there you go, 140. So it's almost 100 watts. 80 watts is my charging on my MacBook. So if you look here underneath charging, I've got 97.3. Again, this is kind of a moment in time, and then here's kind of how you kind of look at what it's been doing. Quickly, I don't normally do this because I do it for my phone, but over on the laptop it just gives you kind of all of your data here together. My DC loads, this is, you can see every time my fridge kicks in, that's basically the DC side. And then my solar charging, you see at night it's not really charging anything. And then it went up, it got cloudy, went up, got cloudy again. So right now we're doing 600 watts of charging out of 800 watts. So I don't have exactly the best situation. My motor controller, this part here is a huge benefit to me. So I have the temperature sensor feeding into the Cerbo, and I've labeled that controller as the motor controller, and then it's storing the data, and it pulls it up and stores it into the Cerbo itself. Again, the Cerbo is what gives you like the history, and then it keeps firing up the data up here, which gives you even more history. I think it holds like about a day or 24 hours or maybe 2 days worth of data in the Cerbo. So as long as you kind of connect to the internet, it'll discharge all that to the internet every couple of days. You can kind of keep a running history. The temperature is just getting that from the GPS. So this is probably a key thing. So you scroll down a little bit. I use this a fair amount to just understand what's going, but specifically with my motor, more importantly, or when I added something new to the system to get to know it, I kind of look at and observe what the impacts are. So this blue line at the top is, you can see here, we're running at 100%. I think I left it plugged in 2 nights ago. It's because I was going to do a motor test, and then this is actually my motor tests. I got it down to 76%, and then it climbed back up during the day, and then at night I left it unplugged, and you can see it went down to 74, 75% this morning, and then it crept up again. The sun's now out, and it's pumping 600 watts into it. So you can kind of look at whatever period that you want. So if we just take a look at today, you can see that I've consumed 2.4 kilowatt hours, and I've taken 2.7 kilowatt hours in from the sun. So this is a huge benefit. If I want to take a look at what was yesterday, then it'll give me a look at, here's how yesterday happened at night. It went down to this consumption, and then, you know, it looks like, again, at night, it's slowly going down again. So maybe it gets a little bit, like, unless you really know what happened that day, that's kind of like really where things are. But if I take a look at, you can take a look at this week. You can go back to this month, and you can kind of get an idea of the red is the consumption, the yellow is the replenishment from the sun. And so you can kind of see that some days the sun is more. That's really when it catches up. And you can kind of take an average. I'm hovering. My lowest peak was, looks like 57% here on one day. and then my average is probably around here. You know, I'd say a battery average 89%, 82%. So it's hard to see, but again, up here, I got 11 kilowatts from the grid when I plugged in to keep the motor charged overnight. 63 was how much I consumed. 53 came from my own solar panels, and that's over the last month. If I take a look kind of the previous month, you can see I don't plug in very much. And I didn't have the Starlink there. So this is the benefit of Starlink. You can see now I've got continuous data that I really appreciate. I'm just going to flip over into the advanced. Here in the Victron universe, this is really where I find the nitty gritty. You can pick what attributes you're looking for. So for me, motor controller is actually a big thing. So you can kind of drag across the map, any one of these graphs, and it will zoom into whatever that period is. So this was, it looks like July 23rd, 8 a.m. to July 24th. So I just want to take a look here. So then I'm just dragging across and it's zooming in. So between 8 in the morning and I want to say this is my constant motor controller temperature was pretty consistent here. Why I'm looking at that in particular is because I discovered a root cause to my motor problem, and the tool helped me figure that out a little bit. Was that one of my phases was, well, they were all a little bit corroded, but one of my phases was working harder than the other, and my controller was getting hotter than I expected. So I cleaned it, and now this is as hot as it got. It got to 40 degrees Celsius. And then I have on the different graphs, you can kind of figure out, well, what happened? Well, my battery temperature it kind of steadily increased that day from 18 to 24, which kind of makes sense. I think it was 30 degrees outside. The current here, this one's really useful. During my motor test, I didn't have the Starlink on, so I did not update this. That's one drawback. That's why, for some reason, on this data point, the battery temperature and the bus, these data points are coming from the Quattro. So I turned the Quattro off during this period, so the data point is missing. But the data would have been there from the BMV. So I just don't have the BMV in a graph form here. And I don't remember. It's been a while since I put this on, but you can add more graphs if you need to. But in the meantime, the solar was coming in. And then this was the maximum temperature that I got at for different periods. So the first little bit, I was running at 3.8 knots boat speed and about 1100 watts. So I didn't get, my temperature didn't get anything over 24 degrees. Like it was just to start, I moved, but I ran that way for like half of the harbor. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to try it at 40 amps. And I pushed it to 40 amps and the temperature ran up to 40 degrees. And then I just sort of cruised naturally back to 3 knots of boat speed. And that was drawing about 700 watts. And at that time, if you look here, you can see I was gaining 326 watts of solar. And then the solar kicked in as I was motoring, and then I turned the motor off here. And then I just sort of sat, and that's why the temperature was ambient temperature 28. Like I said, it got pretty hot. So, excuse me. So right here, my motor temperature settled down, but what I was glad about is that nothing went over 40 degrees Celsius, which is a huge difference. And then on the same graph here on the left, the DC voltage, you can see the sun actually recharging the batteries and the voltage increasing. I cooked, and then it went back up to 55 volts, fully charged, and the solar stopped charging by 3 o'clock. What I was just saying there is that You can see on the solar graph, my temperature stayed the same. My motor was off, but my solar was catching up and was bringing the battery voltage up. And then eventually it actually shut down. So you can kind of see down here at 3 o'clock, I was only pulling in 70 watts. And that was basically just to offset the Starlink. Everything was fully charged again by 3 o'clock. Even though I had reduced my battery voltage down quite a bit. I don't know where that is. That would have been in the dashboard view, looking at the last 2 days. So even though I brought it down to 75%, so I used 25% of my battery, it was fully charged by 3 o'clock with me cooking lunch, and I ran the motor for quite a while there. So I started at 9, yeah, it was 9, and then you can see I finished motoring at 3 o'clock. No, I finished motoring here 12. So I motored for, well, between 11 and 12. So between 2 and 3 hours, I motored out there. So it was pretty significant. I didn't have the sun in the beginning, which is why I lost a lot of voltage. But then the sun was picking up, and it helped offset my usage. So that's what I kind of get out of the Victron system. And then from a safety margin standpoint, you know, if I take a look back at the last 30 days, this is where I kind of find the research helpful. Is I can see, okay, my one of my lower points here was 56% and 57%, 71%, 98, 75%, 74%, 75%, 78%. So my battery voltages aren't going down. I'm not really consuming. There's a couple times where I consumed more, but I might not have had as much sun. So you can see here when it was a cloudy day, that was periods of time, cloudy day, and I was using the motor, that it used more than I would normally use. So I would say on a normal use, I'm in the 75 range, or 25% of my battery gets used pretty much every day, some days less. And that's just, I've been on holidays and I've been on the boat more. I've been doing some sailing, cooking, sleeping on the boat. So as soon as you start doing that, you're using things, you're just using more of the batteries. And the days that I'm not, you know, you can see up here it's 88%. So I'm using 10% of my battery, 10, 12%. So that's the benefit of the VRM Victron tool, is that it gives me that level of information and statistics that I can look back over time to analyze. Do I have enough batteries? Do I have enough charging? Is there something that's going on my system that I need to do some diagnostics for? That's actually the biggest power of this system. And for that, like I said, I call it the Victron universe, because like all the components talk to each other. I still didn't do the DC-DC converter, but the DC power, this 3 watts, 7 watts, 18 watts of usage right now, is actually coming through my DC-DC converters. So it's able to determine that in the smart shunt. Just a bunch of things like that. Like this system, Victron tried to make everything talk with each other. And that's one of the big benefits of this. I kind of had disjointed things, like the Chinese thing was totally, I couldn't understand it. But the Renogy thing did it, so you have a decent job reading the data, but it wouldn't talk to anything else. So Victron with their system has everything kind of licked under the hood here. And I do have the Quattro. I'm going to go into that maybe in a different video, but in this instance, when you plug in, you see how much is coming in. The Cerbo kind of makes decisions about what to use, and sometimes it pulls a little bit of the solar in. Sometimes it pulls none. It says, I'm just going to take everything from the system. But if you start cooking, running more things at the same time, and you're on shore power, the Cerbo kind of figures all that stuff out, and then it says, hey, Quattro, I'm going to send you some power from the battery bank to help filter and clean the power. So some of that decision making in the Quattro and the Cerbo, it's all in there in the system, and then the Cerbo acts as an interface. This screen shows up on my Raymarine Chartplotter, And so that's pretty cool too. So if I want to see this data, I could pull it in as NEMA 2000 data points and plot them as overlays on my screen. So I've done that in the past. Maybe I'll do an overlay picture here. But I find that useful because then I'm getting some of the battery data points onto my chart plotter, and I couldn't do that before without the Cerbo. They do sell a cable that has the exact screen that you're looking at here, the Northern Comfort interface screen. It's the exact same thing that's on the Touch. I think I'm going to just break my video from there now, and I'll show you this here. So this screen here beside me is the same screen basically as on the VRM, and it's the same thing on the chart plotter. It just looks a little bit different. So that's pretty much, I think, all that I really wanted to go into, mostly. And again, the one thing that I do use this for, going into the menu, is I look at my motor controller temperature. I've not figured out how to get that data point onto the chart plotter yet. And I think it's because it can only take battery temperature. So I would have to put that lead on one of my battery temperature inputs, but then I have it set so that if the temperature is less than a certain degrees, don't charge. So I don't want that. I don't want it thinking the batteries are overheating either. Or, especially if the motor temperature is 50 degrees or something like that. Like, that's pretty excessive for batteries. So anyways, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use it as a quick view screen. I put it right there so I can see it from the cockpit. Gives me the kind of the visual aids as I'm going. When you have an electric motor, you can't just drive. I suppose if I put the generator on and then let it rip, I can do what I need to do. I can charge the batteries from the generator, or I can run the whole electric motor off of the generator. The batteries do the filtering of the power, so the Quattro system and the brains of it just makes everything run a lot smoother. So that's why you want those components. So I could put the generator on and then just motor underneath the generator power. The batteries will do any refinement that's needed, or if I exceed the capability of the generator, then it'll take from the batteries and or the solar. So there's a lot of power in the system that way, and that's really where the smarts and brains are of the system are. And that's why I went with this route, and why I made this video. I just wanted to share that knowledge, because when I started, I would run the batteries dry, and I didn't know why, until I started measuring everything, and I found, okay, even my old incandescent light bulbs on my mast were sucking an amp out each light bulb. And it's like I killed my battery overnight, and I had no power in the morning, and I was like, what's going on? And I had to run the engine back before the electric motor. And it makes you're sitting there scratching your head wondering what's going on. So now I don't do that. Now I've got too much data. So I go back over it, and then I kind of figure out what's going on. And so anyways, a bit of a long video, but I just wanted to get it out there. It's useful. And if anybody has any questions on anything, put them in the comments, and I'll be glad to respond, make a supplementary video. And so I just want to say thanks to all Patreons. Really appreciate your help. You're getting me going. I'm saving up for some new video equipment. I'm running light here, but trying to get through things. Next year, going cruising. So all the help I can get, I'll be cut off, and I'll be self-sustaining. I'll be doing a lot of fishing, I think, and eating fresh fish and what I can find in scourge, at least in the short run. But we'll do what we can do. Right now, I'm still working. And I'm trying to get all these little boat projects done, as well as, support the family and everything. So it's a lot to juggle. But we'll get there. Just got to keep the faith. Anyways, see you in the next video. Thumbs up if you like the video. Appreciate it. Please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. No, there's a little bit more weight on here. So it's a little bit bigger than the CQR.